Hello everyone, it's Catherine here bringing you the books of the Bible. And we're going into the books 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. But let us go over the books of the Bible that we've done so far. Can you remember? Genesis, the beginning. Exodus, they are leaving. Leviticus, God is leading. Numbers, God is counting. Deuteronomy, God is repeating the law. Joshua, remember they're entering the promised land. And it was the spies, Joshua being victorious and the walls falling down. Joshua. Then we did the amazing book of Ruth, which you can hear in the series before the series. And now we're doing the book of 1 Samuel. And how we're going to remember that is Hannah praying and Samuel listening. So it's 1 Samuel. Okay? So let us go through the story. And I'm reading from the Bible. And we're going through the first few chapters of 1 Samuel. So you've been doing your stories with various Sunday school teachers in our team. But I'm just going to go through some of the main points. There was this man, Eli, and he was married to Hannah. But he was also married to another woman, his other wife, Peninnah. And she was blessed with children. But Hannah had no children. And every year they would go to the temple to offer sacrifices of thanksgiving to God. And Eli, who was the priest of the temple, the sons would receive the sacrifices and the offerings. And Peninnah was all happy because she had children and they offered their sacrifices, but Hannah was sad. And in this situation, it wasn't any sin or that she'd made a mistake. So it wasn't self-inflicted sadness. We can call it, it was God appointed. It was the circumstance she was in. So they were offering sacrifices, and her husband, Elkanah, gave her double a portion of offering because he loved her so much. And he said, "Don't be sad. Aren't I better to you than 10 sons?" But he didn't understand her heart. And so she went to the temple. And the interesting thing, when she went to the temple, she didn't walk into where they were making offerings, crying and wailing and making her sadness known to everyone all around her. She kept it privately to herself, and then she took it to the Lord. She went to the temple or to the tabernacle, and she couldn't enter the Holy of Holies, but she was outside, and she prayed a prayer. And when anyone looked at her, they could not see words coming out. So she wasn't even making it loud wailing. She was just crying and making it a secret prayer in her heart to the Lord. And when Eli saw her, or the priest saw her, they were like, "Sure, this woman is drunk." And they were wondering, what is she up to? What is she doing? And I'll just read you part of her prayer. She said, "My heart is crying out to the Lord." And she was weeping bitterly. And Hannah wept, and she would not even eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, "Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? And why is your heart so sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons?" After they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli the priest was sitting at the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, "O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on my affliction of your servant, and remember me, and not forget your servant, but will give me, your servant, a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of my life, and no razor will touch his head, so his hair wouldn't be cut." As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart, and her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman, and Eli said to her, "How long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you." But Hannah answered, "No, no, no, my lord. I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I've been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Then Eli answered, Go in peace, and the Lord of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him. What I love about the story of Hannah is she's very different to Naomi in the book of Ruth that we read about, where Naomi made known to everyone that she had a terrible circumstance happen to her, lost her husband, lost her sons, and somehow was going back home and wailing, renaming her name Mara. She made her situation very vocal to the people. But Hannah was very different. She went straight to God, and she didn't even verbally announce everything that she was praying. She was crying, but she was praying in her heart the Lord, that even Eli just saw her mouth moving but heard no words and thought she was drunk. But she was bringing her request directly to God. And Eli's response is, well, may the Lord answer your prayer. And he did. And she had a little boy named Samuel. Now what's interesting, if we look at the different women of the Bible we've been studying, from Joshua to Ruth and now to 1 Samuel, if you look, Boaz's mom Rahab, she learned all about God through word of mouth, and then she lived with God's people, and she was married to a Jewish or God-fearing man, and then she had Boaz, and she must have raised him in God's ways and taught him in God's ways. Then we have Naomi, who was renamed herself Mara, but she taught Ruth all about God, and she taught Ruth the ways of God, because Ruth didn't even want to leave her side or stay with her people. She said, let your people be my people, let your God be my God. So we look at these women who actually trained and taught their children or their daughters-in-law about God and about the greatness of God. Now we have Hannah, who knows God. She's got a relationship with God to the point that she feels she can go to the temple and just share her heart as she is. That's how we must be, children. We mustn't fear coming to God and just praying. We can pray in our beds. We can pray wherever we are. If we are playing, we can just talk to God and share our hearts just as we are, just as we're feeling. He understands more than we understand sometimes. And she prayed this prayer. God answered her, and he gave her a son. Now it's interesting, this son, she raised him, and then she gave him to the church, just as she said he would. And here we have Samuel, and he grew up in the church, and Hannah would come every year, bring offerings, but I really believe she was also involved in his upbringing. But it's interesting how he gets woken up by a voice, and he thinks, oh, Eli must be calling me. So he rushes to Eli's bed and he says, Eli, did you call me? And Eli says, no, I didn't call you, and then sends him back to bed, and then he's going to sleep, and then he gets called again, and he wakes up and he said, Eli, did you call me? And Eli's like, no, don't keep waking me, go back to bed. And he goes back the third time, and then Eli realized, oh no, God must be speaking to you. So your next response should be, speak, Lord, I'm listening. And he did. And then God told him the things that he was going to do, how Eli's sons were not good, and how Eli was going to raise up Samuel to be the priest to lead the people. So it's a very significant story. And it's interesting in this story that there was no Holy Spirit, but they both had a relationship with God, and God spoke to Samuel, and God spoke into Hannah's heart and answered her prayers. And I love how all these stories are connecting, because in this situation, Eli thought Hannah, his mom, was drunk when she was praying. She said, no, I'm not drunk. I'm just praying in my heart to God. And today we celebrate Pentecost. And the children did, when the tongues of fire came down, and baptized the disciples with the Holy Spirit. And the interesting thing about this story is that the people watching also thought the disciples were drunk, like Eli thought Hannah was drunk. But in this instance, Jesus had died on the cross, he stayed on earth, done witness, and now he'd risen, conquered death, he'd risen up to heaven, was at the right hand of the Father, and now his first fruit of his death and resurrection was sending down the Holy Spirit as he promised. And what's amazing about this story is that God empowered them to speak the words of truth in different languages, and they were united in one voice in love for Jesus, in love for God, and preached his word. And now they all were sealed with the Holy Spirit, as you and I are. So we can speak to God, and the Holy Spirit intercedes with us, intercedes for us, guides our thoughts, guides our minds. And even though Eli spoke or listened to God and responded to God, at that time there was no Holy Spirit. But now we have the Holy Spirit, and that's what's exciting about the lesson that we did today, that ties all the Bible stories, always tie together. But just how Eli thought Hannah was drunk, the people thought the disciples were drunk when they were all speaking in different tongues, and they thought, no, they're making sense. And they brought them the good news, how Jesus had died for their sins, and many were baptized that day and believed in Jesus Christ. So I want to encourage you, as we've been going through the books of the Bible, to believe in Jesus, to trust in him, to call out to him as Hannah did, to pray by the power of the Holy Spirit as the disciples did on the day of Pentecost, and to listen to God through his word like Samuel did, and said, speak, Lord, I'm listening. So let us follow him in all we do and all we say, and I trust he will bless you this week. God bless you.